February 14th, 1990. Valentine's Day in Orlando, Florida. The air is thick with humidity, even in the evening hours. That particular central Florida warmth that clings to your skin like a second layer. Inside the Orlando arena, a building still carrying that new construction smell, still finding its identity in the grand landscape of professional basketball. Something is about to happen that will echo through NBA history for decades to come. But this isn't a story about a game-winning shot. It isn't about a championship moment or a rivalry settled on the court. This is something stranger, something that begins not with triumph, but with absence, with something missing that should have been there. Imagine you are the greatest basketball player on the planet. Imagine you have spent years building an identity, a persona, a legend around a single number. 23. Your number. The number that will one day hang in rafters, be stitched onto the backs of millions of replica jerseys, become synonymous with excellence itself. Now imagine arriving at an arena on a random Wednesday night in February, going through your pre-game rituals, the patterns you've perfected over thousands of games, and discovering that your jersey, your identity, has vanished. No explanation, no note, no trace, just gone. This is not a story about what Michael Jordan wore that night. This is a story about what happens when you take something fundamental away from the most competitive human being in basketball history and expect him to simply adjust. This is a story about improvisation at the highest level, about turning frustration into fuel, about a nameless, numberless backup jersey that would become one of the most iconic pieces of fabric in sports history. This is the story of a theft that was never solved, a mystery that haunts NBA security protocols to this day, and a performance that defied logic. This is the story of 49 points scored by a man who wasn't wearing his own skin. 49 points in a jersey that didn't fit right, didn't feel right, didn't bear his name. This is the story of the night Michael Jordan became number 12. The night Michael Jordan became number 12, a legacy of Game 7 documentary. To understand this night, we must first understand who Michael Jordan was in February of 1990. We must understand the hunger that defined him, the drive that separated him from every other talented player in the league. Michael Jeffrey Jordan entered the 1989-1990 NBA season as a player on the precipice. He had been named MVP the previous year. He had won scoring titles. He had dazzled crowds with performances that seemed to defy the laws of physics and human possibility. But he had not won a championship. That absence, that gaping hole in his resume, gnawed at him constantly. It was the fire that woke him up at 4 in the morning for extra workouts. It was the voice that whispered in his ear during every fourth quarter, during every close game, reminding him that greatness without rings was incomplete greatness. By February of 1990, Jordan was averaging just over 33 points per game. He was in the midst of another season that would see him claim the scoring title, his 4th consecutive crown. He was 27 years old, in the absolute prime of his physical powers, moving with a combination of grace and violence that had never been seen before and has rarely been seen since. His first step was explosive. His vertical leap seemed to grant him extra seconds in the air that other players simply didn't have. His hands, massive and sure, could palm the basketball like it was a grapefruit. But more than his physical gifts, it was his mind that separated him. Jordan possessed a basketball intelligence that bordered on precognition. He saw plays developing before they happened. He understood angles, spacing, and timing with the precision of a physicist. And more than any of that, he possessed a psychological edge that was almost cruel in its efficiency. He wanted to destroy you, not just beat you but break you, make you question whether you belonged on the same court. The Chicago Bulls of February 1990 were a team in transition, a team learning how to win. Phil Jackson had taken over as head coach the previous season, bringing with him a system that would eventually be known as the triangle offense, a fluid, read and react approach that required intelligence, unselfishness, and trust. Jordan was still learning to fully embrace it, still learning that dominating the ball for 48 minutes wasn't the only path to victory. Scottie Pippen was emerging as a legitimate all-star caliber player, a long, athletic forward who could defend multiple positions and create offense in transition. Horace Grant was developing into a reliable power forward, bringing energy and rebounding. But the Bulls were not yet champions. They were not yet the dynasty that would define the 90s. They were still a team that could lose on any given night. Still a team searching for that championship identity. The NBA of 1990 was a different league than the one we know today. This was a more physical era, a time when fouls that would draw flagrant penalties today were simply considered playoff basketball. Hand-checking was legal. Defensive. Players could body up offensive players in ways that would make modern fans gasp. The game was slower, more deliberate, played in the post as much as on the perimeter. Travel was different too. Teams flew commercials more often than not. Players sat in airport terminals with regular travelers, signed autographs while waiting. For delayed flights, dealt with lost luggage and cramped seats. There was no private charter for most road trips, no luxury that insulated players from the grind of an 82-game schedule. Security was different. Locker rooms were not the fortified sanctuaries they would become. Equipment managers had not yet developed the paranoid systems of checks and double checks that are standard today. Jerseys were valuable, yes, but they were not yet the million-dollar memorabilia items they would become. They were work uniforms, carefully maintained, but not guarded like crown jewels. The Orlando Magic were in their first season of existence, an expansion franchise finding its footing in a league that was rapidly growing. The Orlando Arena, their home court, was a modern facility by the standards of 1990, but it lacked the institutional knowledge, the refined security protocols, and the experienced staff that older arenas possessed. Everything was new. Everything was still being figured out. For Orlando fans, watching Michael Jordan play in person was an event. The Magic were not yet competitive. They would finish their inaugural season with an 18-64 record, one of the worst in the league. But on nights when superstars visited, the building filled. The fans came to witness greatness even if it wore the opposing team's uniform. February 14th, 1990, was supposed to be one of those nights. A Wednesday evening game, meaningless in the grand scheme of the season, but carrying that electricity that always followed Jordan. The Bulls were 15-26 on the road that season, struggling away from the United Center. Jordan was determined to change that. Every game was an opportunity to prove something, to make a statement, to move one step closer to the championship that consumed his thoughts. The Bulls arrived at Orlando Arena that afternoon following their standard routine. Shoot-around in the morning, film session, pre-game meal, then to the arena several hours before tip-off. Jordan's routine was sacred, unchanging. He would arrive, change into his practice gear, go through his warm-up ritual, return to the locker room, shower, receive treatment from the training staff, dress in his game uniform, and then enter his pre-game mental space, that zone of focus where nothing existed, except the upcoming 48 minutes. His jersey would always be hanging in his locker. Number 23, Bulls red. His name across the shoulders in bold letters, Jordan. It was part of the ritual, seeing it there, putting it on, feeling the fabric settle across his shoulders. It was his armor, his second skin. But on this night, in this new arena, in this expansion city, still learning the rhythms of professional basketball, something was about to go terribly wrong. A mystery was about to begin that would never be truly solved. An absence was about to create one of the most unique performances in NBA history. The stage was set, the player was ready. But his uniform had disappeared into the Florida night, taken by hands unknown, for reasons that remain shadowy and speculative even now, 35 years later. The theft was about to be discovered. The Chicago Bulls team bus pulled into the loading area beneath Orlando Arena at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. The sun was still bright, that late afternoon Florida sunshine that turns everything golden and warm. Players filed off the bus in the casual manner of professionals who have done this hundreds of times, carrying their personal bags, headphones around necks, some talking, some silent, all of them moving through the familiar choreography of a road game. Michael Jordan stepped off the bus, wearing a tailored suit, as was his custom. Even on the road, even in the casual era of professional sports, Jordan understood presentation. He understood that he was not just a player, but a brand, an image, a standard. His shoes were polished. His tie was perfectly knotted, He moved with the confidence of someone who knew he was the best at what he did. The Bulls' equipment manager, a meticulous man named John Ligmanowski, had arrived at the arena earlier to set up the visiting locker room. This was standard procedure. He would unpack the uniforms, hang them in each player's assigned locker, arrange towels, prepare the training room, make sure everything was exactly as it should be. Ligmanowski took pride in his work, understood that these small details mattered, that professional athletes performed better when their environment was orderly and familiar. He had unpacked the garment bags containing the uniforms, road red jerseys. The Bulls would be wearing their red away uniforms this evening, that bright, unmistakable Chicago red that stood out on any court. Each jersey had been carefully folded, packed in Chicago, transported on the team plane, brought to the arena in equipment bags that had made this same journey dozens of times this season. The visiting locker room at Orlando Arena was located in the lower level of the facility, accessed through a series of corridors that wound beneath the seating bowl. It was not a large room, but it was functional, meeting NBA standards for visiting team accommodations. Lockers lined 3 walls. A training table occupied the center. Showers and a bathroom were accessible through a side door. Everything was clean, new, still carrying that fresh paint and polished concrete smell of a building that had not yet accumulated years of sweat and history. Ligmanowski had hung each jersey in its corresponding locker. Pippen's number 33, Grant's 54, B.J. Armstrong's 11. And in the corner, in the locker that would be Michael Jordan's for this evening, he had hung number 23, or had he? This is where the story fractures into uncertainty. This is where eyewitness accounts become fuzzy, where memories conflict, where the truth becomes elusive. Some reports suggest the jersey was hanging in Jordan's locker when Ligmanowski first set up the room. Others suggest it was never unpacked at all, that it vanished somewhere between Chicago and Orlando, taken from a garment bag during transport. Still others believe the jersey was taken from the locker room itself during the window of time before the Bulls arrived, stolen by someone with access to the facility, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. What is certain is this: when Michael Jordan entered the visiting locker room at Orlando Arena on February 14th, 1990, his jersey was not where it should have been. The discovery came approximately 90 minutes before tip-off. Jordan had finished his warm-up routine on the court, that methodical series of shots and stretches that prepared his body for competition. He returned to the locker room, showered, and began dressing for the game. He reached for his locker, expecting to find his jersey hanging there as it always was, as it had been for hundreds of games before this one. It wasn't there. Jordan stared at the empty space where his jersey should have been. His expression shifted from confusion to irritation. He called out to Ligmanowski, asking where his jersey was. The equipment manager, certain he had unpacked it, checked the garment bag. Then he checked the other bags. Then he began searching through the entire equipment setup, looking for the familiar red fabric with the white number 23. A search began. Quietly at first, trying not to create panic or alarm, but growing more urgent as minutes passed. Ligmanowski enlisted the help of assistant equipment managers and training staff. They went through every bag. They checked the laundry room. They walked the corridors between the loading dock and the locker room, looking for anything that might have fallen or been misplaced. They found nothing. Bulls' assistant coaches were notified. They joined the search, now expanding into areas of the arena that seemed absurd but had to be checked. The shower room, the training room, the tunnel leading to the court, the referee's locker room. Anywhere the jersey might have somehow ended up. Still nothing. Orlando Arena staff were questioned. Has anyone seen a Bulls jersey? Had anyone been in the visiting locker room who shouldn't have been? The arena was new. Security protocols were still being refined, and the staff themselves were still learning the facility. Access control was not what it would become. Doors that should have been locked might have been propped open. Corridors that should have been monitored might have been empty. No one had seen anything, or if they had, they weren't saying. The jersey had simply ceased to exist, vanished as completely as if it had never been packed in Chicago at all. By now, other Bulls players were aware of the situation. Scottie Pippen watched the increasingly frantic search with growing concern. B.J. Armstrong asked if they should inform the league office. Horace Grant, ever practical, asked what Jordan was supposed to wear if the jersey couldn't be found. That was the question that now needed answering. In less than an hour, the Chicago Bulls and Orlando Magic would take the court for an NBA game. Television cameras would be positioned. Officials would be ready. 14,000 fans would be in their seats. And Michael Jordan, the face of the NBA, the most famous basketball player on the planet, had no jersey to wear. Ligmanowski made the call. There was no backup number 23 in the equipment bags. This was not an era where teams traveled with duplicate jerseys for every player. Space was limited. Bags were packed efficiently, and the assumption was that jerseys, carefully maintained and guarded, would not go missing. That assumption had just been proven catastrophically wrong, but there was a backup jersey. There was always one backup, a nameless, numberless emergency option for situations like injuries or unexpected roster changes. In the Bulls' equipment bag was a single spare red road jersey. It bore no name across the shoulders, and it was number 12, Jordan was informed. His reaction was carefully controlled, the kind of cold anger that was more dangerous than explosive rage. He asked again if anyone had found his jersey. They had not. He asked if there was any way to get his number 23 jersey from another source. There was not. He was told his options: wear the number 12 jersey or forfeit the game. Michael Jordan did not forfeit games. He took the number 12 jersey from Ligmanowski's hands. He held it up, examining it as if it was some alien artifact. The fabric felt slightly different, the cut not quite tailored to his specific measurements. There was no nameplate across the shoulders, no Jordan in bold letters proclaiming his identity. Just a blank space where his name should have been, and the number 12 in white against the red fabric. Jordan pulled the jersey over his head. It settled across his shoulders, and immediately he felt the wrongness of it. The fit was slightly loose in the torso, slightly tight in the arms. The length was fractionally different from what his body expected. Every athlete knows their equipment intimately, knows how it should feel, how it should move with their body. This felt foreign. This felt like wearing someone else's skin. But Jordan did not complain. He did not demand they delay the game or find some other solution. He simply adjusted the jersey, tucked it into his shorts, and began his final pre-game preparations. If they wanted to take his identity, he would show them that Michael Jordan was more than a number, more than a name stitched on fabric. In the hallway outside the locker room, the mystery remained. Somewhere in Orlando, someone possessed Michael Jordan's game-worn jersey from February 14, 1990. Whether they knew what they had taken, whether they understood the significance of their theft, whether it was planned or opportunistic, all of that remained unknown. The jersey was gone. The investigation would continue half-heartedly in the days that followed. Security footage would be reviewed, though the cameras of 1990 captured grainy, limited angles. Staff would be questioned again. The team would file reports, but nothing would come of it. The jersey had vanished into the collector's market, or into someone's private collection, or into a trash bin somewhere in central Florida. It was simply gone. One of the most recognizable pieces of sports memorabilia in the world, stolen before it could even be worn, before it could absorb the sweat and effort of the game it was meant for. The number 12. In the history of basketball, in the long lineage of numbers worn by great players, 12 has belonged to many. John Stockton would wear it to the Hall of Fame. Dwight Howard would wear it during his prime. Countless other players, from college to the professional ranks, have chosen 12 for reasons ranging from birth dates to childhood heroes to simple availability. But for one night, for one game, number 12 belonged to Michael Jordan. And that single night would make this particular jersey more famous than entire careers of players who wore that number for years. Understanding the significance requires understanding what number 23 meant to Jordan and what it had come to mean to basketball culture itself. Jordan had chosen 23 in high school, inspired by his older brother Larry, who wore 45. Michael wanted a number close to half of his brothers, and 23 became his selection, his brand, his identity. By 1990, that number had transcended mere designation and become iconic. When you saw 23 on a basketball court, you knew who it was before you saw the face. The number itself had become synonymous with excellence. To take that away from Jordan, even temporarily, even accidentally, was to strip him of part of his armor. part of his psychological edge. Athletes are creatures of ritual and routine. They wear the same socks in the same order. They tie their shoes with the same pattern of loops and knots. They eat the same pre-game meals, follow the same warm-up sequences, sleep on the same side of the bed in hotel rooms. These rituals are not superstition, or rather they are superstition in its purest form, the human need to create order and control in situations where outcomes are uncertain. The number 12 jersey that Jordan wore on February 14, 1990, was meant to be anonymous. It was the backup, the emergency option, the jersey that was never supposed to see court time under normal circumstances. It had no name because names were expensive to add, and backup jerseys by definition might be worn by any player in an emergency. It was a blank slate, a generic option kept in reserve for situations exactly like this one. The fit was different. Jordan's regular jerseys were tailored to his specific measurements, cut to allow his full range of motion while conforming to NBA regulations about jersey length and width. Every athlete of his caliber had their uniforms customized, adjusted to their preferences. Some liked them loose, allowing airflow and freedom. Others preferred them tight, reducing anything an opponent could grab. Jordan had found his preferred fit over years of professional play, and his equipment manager ensured every jersey met those specifications exactly. The number 12 did not. It was slightly larger in the shoulders, which created excess fabric that bunched slightly when Jordan raised his arms for a shot. It was longer in the torso, hanging a fraction of an inch lower than Jordan's muscle. Memory expected, altering the tactile feedback he received when running and cutting. The armholes were positioned differently, just millimeters off from what his body had learned over thousands of repetitions. These seem like minor details, insignificant variations that shouldn't matter to an athlete of Jordan's caliber. But professional. Sports exist in the margins, in the fractional differences between perfect and slightly off, between automatic and requiring conscious thought. When your body has repeated the same motion 10,000 times in the same uniform, any variation creates a cascade of tiny adjustments, micro-corrections that require a sliver of attention that would otherwise be devoted entirely to the game. Jordan felt all of this as he stood in the tunnel, waiting for his introduction. He felt the wrongness of the fabric, the unfamiliar drape of the material, the absence of his name across his shoulders. In the locker room, he had tested his shooting motion, his defensive stance, his cutting movements, all while wearing number 12. Everything felt slightly off, like playing a musical instrument that was tuned a quarter step away from true. The Orlando Magic were introduced first, as the home team, each player running through a gauntlet of young fans, high-fiving and chest-bumping, before taking their positions for the opening tip. The crowd cheered appropriately, supportive but not yet electric. This was an expansion franchise, remember, and most of these fans had only recently become basketball fans at all, drawn by the novelty of having an NBA team in their city. Then came the Bulls introductions. Pippen, Grant, Armstrong. Each name echoed through the arena, each player acknowledged by polite applause from the Orlando fans and louder cheers from the pockets of Bulls supporters scattered through the stands. Visiting fans always traveled to see Jordan, willing to sit in opposing team sections just to witness him in person. And then, from North Carolina at 6 feet 6 inches, number 12, Michael Jordan. Number 12. The announcement landed strangely, the wrongness of it evident even to the PA announcer, who paused fractionally before saying the number, as if double-checking his information. The crowd reacted with a murmur of confusion. People who had come to see number 23, who had brought their Bulls jerseys with 23 on the back, who had posters and magazines featuring number 23, now saw Jordan emerge from the tunnel wearing 12. Television commentators, preparing for the broadcast, scrambled to understand what they were seeing. Chip Carey, handling play-by-play duties, could be heard asking his production team what had happened, why Jordan was wearing a different number. Information was relayed to him about the missing jersey, though details were still scarce. He would have to explain the unusual situation to viewers tuning in across the country, many of whom would be just as confused as the fans in the arena. Jordan himself showed no external sign of discomfort. He moved through his typical pre-game routine, stretching, taking practice shots, conferring briefly with Phil Jackson, but those who knew him well, who had been around him for years, could see the subtle signs of agitation. The set of his jaw was tighter, his movements were more aggressive, more forceful than usual. He was channeling the frustration, converting it into the kind of focused intensity that his opponents should have feared. Scottie Pippen approached Jordan during warm-ups, asking if he was okay. If the different jersey was throwing off his rhythm, Jordan's response was characteristically brief and direct. He was fine, he was ready, and the Magic were about to learn that taking away his identity only made him more dangerous. Other Bulls players had different reactions. Some found the situation amusing, a story they would tell for years about the night Mike wore number 12. Others were concerned, worried that the disruption would affect Jordan's performance and, by extension, the team's chances of winning. They need not have worried. If anything, the jersey theft had accomplished the opposite of its presumed intention. It had awakened something in Jordan, triggered that competitive response that made him most dangerous. The Orlando Magic players noticed immediately that something was different. They saw the number 12 jersey during warm-ups and asked their own coaches what had happened. Word spread through the roster. Jordan's jersey had been stolen. He was wearing a backup. Some of the younger Magic players saw this as an opportunity, a chance to face Jordan when he was off his game, disrupted, and thrown from his routine. They were wrong, catastrophically, dangerously wrong. But they would not realize their error until it was far too late. The psychological element cannot be overstated. Michael Jordan built his dominance not just on physical superiority, but on mental warfare. He talked trash constantly during games, engaging opponents in verbal combat designed to get inside their heads, to make them think about him instead of the game, to break their confidence. He stared down opponents after dunking on them, held eye contact after blocking their shots, celebrated in their faces after hitting game winners. All of that required projecting absolute confidence, absolute certainty in his superiority. The missing jersey could have undermined that projection. It could have made him seem vulnerable, disrupted, human. But Jordan understood that perception was everything. He could not allow anyone, teammate or opponent, to believe that this disruption affected him. He had to project that he was above such concerns, that he could dominate in any jersey, with any number, under any circumstances. The Orlando Magic won the opening tip. Their center, a journeyman named Mark Akers, tapped the ball back to point guard Sam Vincent, and the Magic brought the ball up court for the first possession of the game. The Bulls settled into their defensive assignments. Jordan taking his position on the perimeter, watching the ball, reading the offensive setup. On this first possession, the Magic worked the ball around the perimeter, looking for an opening, testing the Bulls' defensive rotations. They eventually settled for a mid-range jumper that clanked off the rim. Horace Grant secured the rebound, passed to Armstrong, and the Bulls began their transition up court. This is when Jordan first touched the ball as number 12. Armstrong hit him with a pass on the right wing. Jordan caught it, took 2 dribbles toward the basket, rose into the air and finished with a layup through contact. The ball kissed off the glass and dropped through the net. 2 points. The first 2 of what would become 49. Jordan looked down at his jersey as he ran back on defense, as if reminding himself that the number was different, but the result was the same. The scoreboard didn't care what number he wore. The ball didn't care. Only Jordan cared, and he was converting that care into pure competitive fury. The early minutes of the game established the pattern that would define the entire evening. The Magic were outmatched, but they were scrappy, physical, willing to compete even against a superior opponent. They bodied up Jordan on defense, using the hand-checking rules of the era to their full advantage, trying to disrupt his rhythm, making him work for every touch, every shot, every inch of space. Jordan responded by attacking relentlessly. On the Bulls' second possession, he posted up his defender. A guard named Jerry Reynolds called for the ball, backed Reynolds down toward the basket, then spun baseline for a reverse layup that brought appreciative murmurs from even the home crowd. 4 points. Phil Jackson's offense was predicated on ball movement, on reading the defense and making the correct pass, on trusting your teammates to make plays. But Jackson also understood that when you had Michael Jordan, there were nights when the correct play was to simply get him the ball and let him work. This was becoming one of those nights. Jordan's body language, his intensity, his aggressive pursuit of every opportunity told Jackson that his superstar was in a particular mood, the kind of mood where attempts to slow him down or spread the offense would only frustrate him. So the Bulls fed Jordan. Again and again possessions flowed through him. Sometimes he shot, sometimes he drove, sometimes he passed to open teammates, but he was the center of every offensive action, the sun around which the entire Bulls offense orbited. By the end of the first quarter, Jordan had 14 points. He was shooting efficiently, taking good shots, getting to the free throw line. But more than the statistics, it was the manner of his play that was remarkable. He was hunting. Every cut was purposeful. Every screen was used with precision. Every defensive breakdown was exploited mercilessly. The Magic had no answer for him, no scheme that could slow him down, no defender who could match his combination of skill and determination. The number 12 jersey, which had seemed so wrong in the locker room, was now soaked with sweat, clinging to Jordan's body as he moved up and down the court. The unfamiliar fit was becoming familiar through repetition. Through the muscle memory adjustments that elite athletes make unconsciously, adapting to their equipment rather than being controlled by it. The Bulls led by 8 points at halftime. Jordan had 26 points, already well on his way to one of his signature scoring performances. In the locker room during the intermission, Phil Jackson made no special adjustments. He told his team to keep doing what they were doing, to keep feeding Michael, to keep running in transition. Jordan sat quietly, drinking water, receiving treatment on his legs from the training staff, already thinking about the second half, about maintaining this intensity for another 24 minutes. The missing jersey was no longer a topic of conversation, for in some ways it had been forgotten, superseded by the reality of what was happening on the court. Jordan was performing at an elite level, and the jersey he was wearing had become irrelevant to everyone except historians and memorabilia collectors who would later assign significance to this night. The third quarter began with the Magic attempting a different defensive approach. They started trapping Jordan on the perimeter, sending 2 defenders at him whenever he caught the ball, trying to force him to give it up, to make someone else beat them. It was a sound strategy in theory, the kind of adjustment that coaches make when a single player is destroying your defense. But Jordan had seen every defensive scheme imaginable. He had been trapped, doubled, tripled, faced zones designed specifically to contain him. He knew how to read these defenses, how to exploit them. When the double team came, he found the open man. Pippen got easy looks. Grant had uncontested layups. Armstrong had open 3-point attempts. And when the Magic abandoned the trap, reverting to single coverage because the open shots were killing them, Jordan simply went back to attacking one-on-one. He hit a pull-up jumper from 18 feet. He drove baseline for a thunderous dunk that shook the rim and brought even the Orlando fans to their feet. He hit 2 free throws after drawing a foul on a pump fake that sent his defender flying past him. By midway through the third quarter, Jordan had 38 points. He was now hunting not just victory, but a milestone, one of those scoring totals that gets remembered, that gets replayed in highlight packages for decades. 40 points seemed certain. 50 was within reach. The number 12 jersey, now completely saturated with sweat, had become a second skin. Its earlier unfamiliarity burned away through the intensity of competition. The Magic were not quitting. To their credit, they continued to compete, continued to execute their offense, and continued to fight despite being clearly outmatched. Their young players were getting valuable experience, learning what it meant to play against greatness, understanding the gap between NBA competence and NBA excellence. There was a sequence late in the third quarter that exemplified Jordan's performance that night. The Magic had cut the Bulls' lead to 6 points, creating enough doubt that Orlando Arena began to believe in the possibility of an upset. The Magic had possession with a chance to cut it to 4 or 3, to put real pressure on Chicago. Jordan stole the ball, not with a gamble, not with a reckless reach, but with perfect timing, reading the passing lane, anticipating the play before it developed. He picked off the pass and was immediately in transition, the ball in his hands. Nothing but open court between him and the basket. 2 Magic defenders tried to recover, sprinting back to prevent the easy layup. Jordan rose for the dunk. Not a safe layup, not a conservative finish, but a full extension. tomahawk slam that announced his dominance, that told the Magic and everyone in the building that this game was over, that hope was futile. The dunk pushed his point total to 42 and extended the Bulls' lead back to 8. The third quarter ended with Jordan having 44 points. He had not yet missed many shots. His efficiency was remarkable, nearly automatic from everywhere on the court. The fourth quarter would determine whether this became a truly historic performance or merely an excellent game. Phil Jackson called a timeout early in the fourth quarter. He pulled Jordan aside and asked him directly, did he want to stay in and chase 50, or should they manage his minutes, rest him for upcoming games, play the percentages? Jordan's answer was delivered with eye contact, not words. He was staying in. He was finishing this. The next 6 minutes were a clinic in offensive basketball. Jordan hit a fadeaway jumper from the baseline, his signature shot elevating over his defender, holding the ball at the apex of his jump, releasing it with perfect rotation and arc. 46 points. He drove through the lane, absorbed contact from 2 defenders, finished with his left hand, made the basket, drew the foul. 48 points. The free throw made it 49. 49 points in a nameless jersey. 49 points in the wrong number. 49 points in equipment that was never meant to be worn in an NBA game. The number seemed fitting, 1 point shy of 50. As if even Jordan's scoring total reflected the incompleteness of the night, the missing piece that was his stolen jersey. The final minutes of the game saw Jordan handling the ball less frequently, allowing his teammates to close out the victory. He had made his statement. The frustration of the missing jersey had been converted into fuel, and that fuel had been completely consumed through 4 quarters of basketball excellence. History remembers moments not for what actually happened, but for what they represent. The night Michael Jordan wore number 12 represents something fundamental about athletic greatness, about the separation between elite and transcendent, about the difference between being affected by circumstances and using circumstances as fuel. Jordan could have allowed the missing jersey to throw him off. He could have been distracted, frustrated, unable to focus, and no one would have blamed him. The theft was a violation, a disruption of routine, a psychological challenge on top of the physical challenge of playing an NBA game. Any performance below his standards would have been understandable, even forgiven. But Michael Jordan did not traffic in excuses. He did not accept the premise that external circumstances could determine his performance. He believed, with an almost religious certainty, that greatness came from within, that excellence was a choice, that domination was a mindset available to anyone willing to pay the psychological and physical price to achieve it. The 49 points he scored wearing number 12 were not just numbers on a stat sheet. They were a message. To the thief, whoever they were, you cannot disrupt me. To the Orlando Magic, you cannot stop me. To his teammates, you can trust me. To the NBA, I am beyond your rules, your expectations, your limitations. To himself, I am who I believe I am, regardless of what I wear or what obstacles I face. This is why we tell these stories. Not because we care about the jersey itself, though its disappearance remains a fascinating mystery. Not because one regular season game in February 1990 was particularly significant in the grand scheme of Jordan's career. We tell this story because it illuminates something essential about greatness, about the mentality required to perform at the highest level under any circumstances. The legacy of Game 7 exists to preserve these stories, to dive deep into the moments that defined sports history, to explore not just what happened, but why it mattered, and what it tells us about human potential and competition and the pursuit of excellence. This is the kind of long-form, deeply researched, cinematically told sports storytelling that you'll find on this channel. If you appreciated this deep dive into the night Michael Jordan wore number 12, if you value detailed, thoughtful exploration of sports history's most fascinating moments, then this channel was created for you. Legacy of Game 7 brings you documentary-style content that respects your intelligence, your passion for sports, and your desire to understand the deeper meaning behind the games we love. Subscribe to Legacy of Game 7 to join a community of fans who believe that sports stories deserve to be told with the depth and care they merit. We explore the games that changed everything, the moments that defined careers, the stories that remain untold or undertold in mainstream sports media. Every video is crafted with the same attention to detail, the same commitment to storytelling, the same respect for the legends and the history that you've experienced today. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss when we release our next deep dive, and leave a comment below telling us what legendary moment you want us to explore next. What game changed basketball history? What performance deserves the documentary treatment? What mystery remains unsolved? Your suggestions guide our content, and your engagement builds this community. The night Michael Jordan wore number 12 reminds us that legends are not born from perfect circumstances. They are forged in the moments when everything goes wrong, when obstacles appear, when challenges emerge that would derail lesser competitors. Legends are created when someone faces disruption and responds not with excuses, but with excellence. Not with frustration, but with focus. Not with acceptance, but with domination. Michael Jordan's jersey was stolen that night in Orlando. But what he created while wearing number 12, what he proved about the nature of greatness, what he added to his legend, that can never be stolen, that belongs to history. That belongs to all of us who watched, who remember, who understand that sports at its highest level is about more than games and scores and statistics. It's about the human spirit refusing to be limited. It's about competitors finding ways to win, even when the conditions are wrong. It's about the transformation of adversity into art, of challenge into triumph, of setback into story. Number 12 only existed for one night. But the legend of that night, the story of what happened when someone tried to take Michael Jordan's identity, and he responded by proving that greatness transcends uniform numbers, that legend lives forever. This is Legacy of Game 7. Subscribe, engage, remember. Because the greatest moments in sports history deserve to be told with the depth, detail, and respect that makes them eternal.